One of the most difficult decisions I had to make as the parent of autistic children was around how to help them. What did they need help with? What were the appropriate strategies and programs and therapies that would fit my children? I worried a lot about current approaches and strategies and therapies being informed by research based on the comparison of the autistic brain, which is considered in the medical world disordered, in comparison to neurotypical brains, which are non-autistic brains. It's easy to look at a typical brain and to say that anything that deviates from that is disordered, therefore needs correcting and fixing and changing. It's easy to do that. We have this lifelong history of doing this. For me, I knew that my concerns were not common. I knew that worrying about how a therapy might negatively impact my children's sense of self was different. I knew that was a different way of thinking about it. My 7-year-old, she was the first to be diagnosed in our family. When she was diagnosed, all I cared about was an evidence-based program, and I found one. It wasn't hard to find. And I engaged her in that therapy. Not for long, I think for about 6 months. The people delivering the therapy were beautiful human beings with qualifications in all the right places, doing all the right things, having studied all the right things to study. And still, when I drove home every day after dropping her off, I felt in my gut it wasn't right for her. And there were even days where I would cry in the car all the way home. And my brain wanted to rationalize that. My gut, my intuition told me this isn't right for her, and my brain wanted to fight that intuition. It told me this is evidence-based, it comes highly recommended. The studies suggest that there are great outcomes, but I guess the defining sentence for that therapy was, your child will be indistinguishable from their peers. And that breaks my heart. God, that breaks my heart. On my entire life, modelling myself off other people that appeared to be doing life really well, really successfully. So I'd take bits and pieces that I saw in other people all of my life, and I'd mimic those bits and pieces. It might have been facial expressions, it might have been the way somebody moved their body when they walked, it might have been the way they spoke. I mean, human beings, we all do this to some degree. But autistic women, autistic females in particular, do this to the point where we appear more typical than typical people. And it's extremely difficult to pick up that we're autistic. And as a person who went my whole life having no clue who I was, finding myself in trouble all the time and not really understanding why, knowing that I had very different perspectives on life and people to others, feeling at this level of intensity that I knew other people didn't feel, made me acutely aware that I was different, acutely aware. And I hated it, hated myself. I hated everything about myself that was different. I hated how sensitive I was. I hated that I'd be so disturbed by things I'd see on the news for months. I hated that I would cry for other people. My levels of empathy were so intense and at such a depth that I had to teach myself how to shut it off. And therefore, there's this myth that people on the autism spectrum don't experience empathy, when in fact, many of us experience it to this umpteenth degree that is just painful for us, you know, like more painful than our own stuff in life. Tapping into my experience, and I didn't even know that I was on the spectrum at this point with my child in therapy, but I couldn't deny my experience of being removed from who I was, always trying to disconnect from who I was, this person I was. And I saw myself as just this idiot who could never get it right. I'd say the wrong things, I'd do the wrong things. I was hyperactive, I was so distracted, I had to leave school at 15. But at the same time, I was academically gifted, but I couldn't sit in a classroom and learn. I got into so much trouble as a teenager because I was so disconnected from myself, from everyone, from everything. And I don't feel that way anymore. And my diagnosis of autism is what changed that for me. And I don't want my children to be delivered therapies that give them this acute awareness of their difference being something that isn't okay and needs to be fixed, corrected, or changed. And deliver a program to them that encourages them to always be thinking about other people and completely dismissing themselves. And we do that. As girls on the spectrum, we do that. Social skills programs, so tricky. We need help with social skills. But the kind of help we need is to love ourselves, to accept and appreciate and understand who we are and be okay with that, not to be delivered a program where we are constantly obsessing and fixating and consumed by our fear of not getting it right, not doing it right, upsetting people. Did I just do the right thing? Did I just do the wrong thing? Because we already do that. It doesn't matter how it looks on the outside. It doesn't matter how well we appear to be socializing. That's what goes on behind the scenes, in here and in here. The studies that inform current therapies, particularly evidence-based therapies, are often short-term. We need more longitudinal studies. We need to be following autistic children into adulthood before we can assess whether a study tells us that a therapy is successful and does provide good outcomes. I can tell you that there are thousands of adult autistics in this world who are self-harming, who are aggressive, who hate themselves and their differences, who have acute social anxiety after early intervention because it was dramatically highlighted to them on a daily basis that who they are is not okay. Now, don't get me wrong. Therapy and early intervention is crucial. It is so important. But it's okay as a parent to pick and choose. It's okay to say, no, thank you. That's not the right fit for my child. I teach my children about how to think about other people and to consider their thoughts and feelings. But the foundation for all of that is their relationship with themselves, because if that's not there, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. We need to really be having a rethink on what a successful outcome looks like. What is a successful outcome? Is it really that our children should be indistinguishable from their peers? Do we really want our children to be just the same as everyone else? Do we really want to disconnect our children from themselves to the point where they appear to be typical? Because the truth is, that takes a lot of energy to pretend to be people we're not, to make other people feel more comfortable, destroys our sense of self, destroys us. We need to be putting more energy into educating typical people about what autism is, how we think and how we feel, how to relate to us and how to understand us, because we've received so much education on typical people. But it would be so great, if the non-autistic world could meet us halfway.